Husband dumps me for a younger woman, thinks he won. But then I did this. I always thought if my marriage ended it would be a conversation, maybe even an argument, but not a text message. Yet there I was, standing behind the register at my boutique, helping a customer pick out a silk scarf when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting it to be another vendor confirmation or maybe my assistant texting about inventory. Instead, it was my husband of 10 years. I'm leaving you. Moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. Already emptied the joint account. Good luck. I didn't react. Not outwardly anyway. I smiled at the customer, rang up her purchase and wrapped it carefully in tissue paper. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't falter. The only sign that my entire life had just changed was a slight tightening around my eyes. I waited until she left before typing my response. Good luck. That was it. No begging. No anger. No demands for an explanation. Because the truth was, I had already seen this coming. Let me back up. My name is Hannah, and at 38 I thought I had a solid, if not perfect, marriage. My husband, Luke, 45, wasn't exactly the most affectionate or reliable partner, but we had history. We had built a life together, or at least I thought we had. The signs had been there for months. The late nights at the office that didn't reflect on his paycheck. A new gym obsession despite never caring about fitness before. The sudden wardrobe upgrade, trading in his usual polos for designer shirts that hugged his not-so-toned stomach a little too tightly. But the real tipping point? 3 months ago, I found a receipt for an expensive dinner for two on a night he had told me he was working late. I didn't confront him. Instead, I did something smarter. I opened a separate bank account in my name only. Then, a week later, when he suggested we combine our finances for simplicity, I smiled sweetly and agreed, while quietly moving every dollar of my savings to the new account. The joint account he had just emptied? It only had about 2 months' worth of deposits, just enough to keep him from getting suspicious. The rest? Safe. Untouchable. Mine. Another text from Luke. Don't bother begging. Melissa and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later. Melissa. The new receptionist at his office. I had met her at last year's holiday party. She had laughed too loudly at Luke's jokes and touched his arm whenever she thought no one was looking. I had noticed. I just hadn't cared enough to stop him. I didn't respond to the message. Instead, I did what I had been planning for months. I called my lawyer. It's time, I said simply. I'll file the papers first thing tomorrow, she replied. Want me to have him served in Miami? No rush. Let him think he's won first. And just like that, my revenge was in motion. I spent that evening in her house. Or rather, my house, since I had inherited it from my grandmother and had the foresight to keep it in my name. Luke had suggested multiple times that I add him to the deed. I had always played dumb, acting like I'd forgotten or that I was still working on the paperwork. That little oversight just saved me from losing my home. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff I had been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. Tomorrow, Luke would wake up thinking he had one. But what he didn't realize was, I had been playing the game long before he even knew there was one. The next morning, I woke up feeling fine. No gut-wrenching heartbreak. No tears. No sudden urge to throw my wedding ring into the ocean while screaming at the sky. Just calm down. Because while Luke thought he had just delivered a devastating blow, he had no idea that I had already won. I went about my day as usual, opened my boutique, checked inventory, made small talk with customers. And while I pretended to be unbothered, I was setting my next move in motion. My lawyer, Mia, was already handling the divorce papers. But there was one last thing I needed to do before Luke and Melissa landed in Miami, thinking they were about to start their glamorous new life. See, Luke hadn't just taken my money. He had taken his downfall, he just didn't know it yet. Let's talk about Luke for a second. For years, he had skated by on charm and luck. He wasn't particularly ambitious, but he had one skill, convincing people he was better than he actually was. That was how he got his job, by talking his way into a management position he had no qualifications for. And how he kept it. He does this by making himself look indispensable while dumping the actual workload on everyone else. And more importantly, by keeping a secret that I had known for months. Luke had been claiming expenses from work, meals, hotel stays, business meetings that had nothing to do with work. I hadn't said anything before, because I was waiting. Waiting for him to do something so unforgivable that I'd have no hesitation in burning his life to the ground. And emptying our joint account while running off with his 20-year-old babe? Yeah, that did it. During my lunch break, I made a call. Not to Luke. Not to Melissa. But to Luke's boss. Hey, Mark. I said, my voice casual. You know I don't normally interfere in Luke's work. But there's something you might want to look into. Mark sighed. Please don't tell me he's doing something shady again. Wish I could, I said. But, yeah. And then I told him everything. The fake expense reports. The phony business meetings. The company credit card charges were just him taking Melissa to luxury hotels. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. Luke had dug his own grave. I was just handing Mark the shovel. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Mark sighed again. But this time it wasn't exhaustion. It was pure frustration. "I'll handle it," he said. I thanked him, hung up, and smiled for the first time all day. Because while Luke was boarding a flight to his new life, he had no idea that his career was crashing and burning behind him. That evening, I poured another glass of wine, sat on my patio, and watched the sunset. Tomorrow, Luke would wake up in Miami, thinking he had gotten away with it. And by the end of the day, he'd realize that he hadn't just lost a wife. He had lost everything. Luke landed in Miami that morning, probably grinning like an absolute fool, thinking he had pulled off the perfect escape. I imagined him stepping off the plane, hand in hand with his 20-year-old babe, Melissa, convinced he had outsmarted me. And for a few hours, he got to enjoy his little fantasy. But reality, it was already catching up to him. By noon, my lawyer texted me. Filed the divorce papers. He'll be served in Miami by the end of the week. Perfect. But that was just the beginning. Because back at his company, things were unraveling fast. While Luke was sipping overpriced cocktails, his boss, Mark, had spent the morning going through expense reports. And from what I later found out, it didn't take him long to realize just how deep Luke had dug his own grave. Turns out that Luke had been sloppy. He had overcharged clients, falsified reports, and even spent an entire weekend at a 5-star hotel, claiming it was for a business conference, when it was just a getaway with Melissa. Thousands of dollars. Gone. Worse, some of those charges had been flagged months ago, but Luke had always smooth-talked his way out of it. Not this time. When did Mark confront him? He had receipts, screenshots, and bank statements. Even security footage of Luke walking into that fancy hotel with Melissa on his arm. And just like that, Luke's career was over. Back in Miami, Luke was completely unaware. Suddenly his phone rang, until he picked up, expecting something insignificant. Maybe a quick work call. Only to hear his boss furious on the other end. Mark didn't yell. He didn't need to. He just laid out the facts. "We know what you did, Luke. You're done." Just like that. No argument. No negotiation. Luke had spent years talking his way out of trouble. But this time, there was nothing to say. Because this wasn't just a firing. This was fraud. And it wasn't just the company he had to worry about. When I got the text from Mark later that afternoon, I was standing in my boutique, helping a customer pick out a pair of earrings. "It's done. He's out." I didn't react. Not outwardly, anyway. I simply rang up the earrings, smiled, and thanked my customer. Because while Luke was realizing he had lost his job, his income, his entire professional reputation, I was still standing, still thriving, and I wasn't done yet. Because here's the thing. Luke had never been good with money, and now, he had none left. He thought he had cleaned out our joint account, but he had no idea that I had already drained my savings into a separate one. His severance, frozen pending investigation, his fancy new life in Miami, already falling apart. And Melissa, well, she was about to get a very rude awakening. Because without a cushy job, without his steady paycheck, without his ability to fund her influencer lifestyle, Luke wasn't nearly as attractive anymore. That night, as I locked up my boutique, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Satisfaction. Not just because Luke was finally getting what he deserved, but because I had walked away from it all. From the years of excuses. From the constant disrespect. From a man who thought he could replace me with a younger model and walk away unscathed. Tomorrow, Luke would wake up and realize the truth. He wasn't just starting over. He was starting over with nothing. And as for me, I was just getting started. Luke had always been good at pretending. Pretending to be the perfect husband. Pretending to be a successful businessman. Pretending he had everything under control. But now, reality was knocking on his front door. And it wasn't asking nicely. I got the call from Jake, our mutual friend, while I was closing up my boutique. "Jake, you are not going to believe what just happened." I already had a feeling. "Me, did he finally figure it out?" Jake laughed. "Oh, he figured it out all right. And let's just say he's not handling it well." As it turned out, Luke had gone 2 full days in Miami before everything started collapsing around him. The first day, he probably thought he was living the dream. He had moved into some fancy high-rise condo that Melissa had picked out, one he assumed he could afford. He was probably drinking, partying, and enjoying his new stress-free life. Then, the second day, reality hit. Hard. First, there was the firing. After Mark's call, Luke had tried to salvage the situation, tried to reason, negotiate, maybe even charm his way out of it like he always had. But this time, it didn't work. Mark had already reported the fraudulent expenses to the corporate office, meaning this wasn't just his decision anymore. It was final. Luke was out. No severance. No recommendations. And worst of all, he was blacklisted from every company in his industry. His entire career? Gone. Then there was the money problem. After realizing he had no job, Luke did what he always did. He checked his accounts to see how long he could coast before needing a new plan. And that's when he realized. The joint account he had cleaned out? It barely had anything in it. He had assumed it was our entire savings. He had no idea I had already moved the real money somewhere safe. Which meant, as of that moment, Luke had exactly a condo he couldn't afford, a younger girlfriend who expected luxury, zero income, and the final nail in the coffin? Melissa. See, Melissa wasn't with Luke because she loved him. She was with him because she thought she was trading up, that he was some wealthy, powerful man who could give her the life she wanted. She didn't sign up for a broke, unemployed, blacklisted 45-year-old with no financial backup plan. And when she figured out the truth, she did what any self-serving 20-year-old would do. She left. Jake filled me in on the details. Melissa had taken one look at the bank account balance and had a meltdown. There was yelling, crying, something about how she wasn't going to be stuck with a loser. Then, she packed her bags and left him in the condo alone. By the end of the day, Luke had nothing. No job. No savings. No girlfriend. Just an expensive condo lease he couldn't pay for. I listened to all of this while sipping a cup of tea, feeling completely at peace. Me, so what's he gonna do now? Jake, he's panicking. And guess who he called first? I didn't need to guess. I already knew. Because Luke only knew how to do one thing when he was backed into a corner. Run to me for help. And sure enough, not even an hour later, I got a text from him. The same man who had dumped me over text, thinking he was leaving me behind for a younger woman. Now he was begging for a second chance. Luke, hey. I know things got out of hand. I made some mistakes. Can we talk? Luke, I miss you. Miami isn't what I thought it would be. Luke, I was stupid. I don't want to lose you. Let's fix this. I stared at my phone, amused beyond belief. He thought he could come back after everything. That I'd just welcome him home like nothing had happened. But the best part? He still didn't know about the divorce papers. Which meant he was about to have an even bigger surprise waiting for him. I didn't respond to Luke's messages. Not right away. Because if he thought he could just waltz back into my life after what he did, he was about to get a lesson in consequences. And I wanted him to sweat a little first. I went about my normal day, opened my boutique, helped customers, grabbed lunch with a friend. Meanwhile, Luke was spiraling. His texts went from pathetic apologies to frantic desperation within hours. Luke, Hannah, please. At least call me. Luke, I know I messed up. But we can fix this. Luke, I can come back to you. We can start over. That one made me laugh out loud. Shall we start over? No, Luke. You can start over. Somewhere else. Because as far as I was concerned, I had already moved on. By the time I got home that evening, I had another message waiting for me. Not from Luke. From my lawyer. Divorce papers successfully delivered. He knows now. I grinned. Because now? Now it was real. An hour later, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, another text. This one? Not an apology. Not a plea. But pure anger. Luke, are you serious? You're divorcing me? Luke, I thought we could fix things. How could you just throw away 10 years like that? Luke, you're gonna be that cold? Oh, the irony. The man who dumped me by text now had the nerve to call me cold? I shook my head, but I wasn't surprised. Luke had never taken responsibility for anything in his life. And now, he was trying to rewrite the story so that he was the victim. Typical. Instead of answering, I poured myself a glass of wine and called Jake. Because if I was going to enjoy this moment, I wanted company. Jake picked up on the second ring. So, did he get the papers? I smirked. Oh, he got them. Jake burst out laughing. How's he taking it? Like a man who just realized he bet on the wrong horse. Jake let out a low whistle. Damn, the guy thought he could come crawling back. Huh, like clockwork, I said, swirling my wine. And now? He's mad because I'm not letting him. There was a beat of silence. Then, Jake said something that drove it home. You know what's funny? What? He thought you were the backup plan. I blinked. Then, I started laughing. Because Jake was right. Luke had left me thinking Melissa was the better deal. Then, when that fell apart, he tried to slip back into my life like nothing happened. Like I was the one who had been waiting for him. But the truth? The moment he walked out that door, I had already let him go. I finally texted Luke back. Just one message. You made your choice. This is mine. Goodbye. Then, I blocked his number. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. But because I was officially done. Luke had made his big, dramatic exit thinking he was moving on to something better. Turns out, I was the one who got the upgrade. Blocking Luke's number should have been the final nail in the coffin. But of course, a man like him, he didn't know when to quit. For the next week, I lived my life completely free of his nonsense. I focused on my boutique, went out with friends, and finally took the time to enjoy being single. And let me tell you, there's something incredibly liberating about waking up and realizing you don't have to deal with a man-child's drama anymore. No checking my phone for his excuses. No wonder he'd pull another disappearing act. No feeling like I had to fix things. It was pure peace. Until he tried to crawl back in another way. One morning, I was in the middle of setting up a new jewelry display when my assistant, Sophie, walked over. She had that awkward look on her face. The kind people get when they're about to say something you won't like. There's a guy outside asking for you. I frowned. A customer? She hesitated. No. He said his name is Luke. I froze. Oh hell no. I stepped outside, and sure enough, there he was. Luke stood there, looking nothing like the confident man who had texted me from a plane to Miami. He looked rough. His shirt was wrinkled. His hair was a mess. And the worst part? He was trying to look pathetic on purpose. As if that would make me take him back. I crossed my arms. What do you want, Luke? He let out a dramatic sigh. Hannah, can we just talk? No. That threw him off. What? No. I repeated. We're divorced. You made your choice. Move on. He ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. Hannah, come on. I screwed up. Okay? But we had 10 years together. You can't just throw that away. I laughed. Luke, you threw it away. Over text. Remember? His jaw was clenched. I wasn't thinking straight. I shrugged. And now? Neither am I. I turned to go back inside. But his next words stopped me cold. I need a place to stay. I stared at him. Then I burst out laughing. Because of this? This was truly the cherry on top. The man who had left me for a 20-year-old babe was now homeless. And he thought I would let him back in? Absolutely not. Let me get this straight, I said, still grinning. Melissa dumped you. You lost your job. And now, you're asking me for help. He swallowed. Look, I know I messed up. But we were married, Hannah. We had a life together. I tilted my head. We had a life. Past tense. Hannah, please. No. I had zero sympathy for him. And then, I made sure he got the message. I took out my phone, pulled up my bank app, and flashed my account balance at him. Because, unlike him, I was still thriving. His face turned white. He finally understood. I hadn't just moved on. I had won. Luke left that day with nothing. And I went back inside, poured myself a cup of coffee, and enjoyed the feeling of being free. Because Luke, he wasn't my problem anymore. And he never would be again. Luke walked away that day, but I knew men like him don't give up easily. Especially when they realize they've lost everything. So I wasn't exactly surprised when, a few days later, my mom called with her concerned voice. Hannah, I just got off the phone with Luke. I rolled my eyes. Of course you did. She hesitated. He sounded desperate. Because he is. She sighed. Hannah, I know he hurt you, but maybe you could find it in your heart to help him. He's got nowhere to go. I leaned back in my chair, already done with the conversation. Mom, let me ask you something, I said. If I had been the one to cheat, leave him for a younger man, drain our account, and then come crawling back when it all fell apart, would you tell Luke to take me back? Silence. Then a quiet no. Exactly, I said. So why should I? That was the last real conversation I had about Luke. Because eventually, even my mom stopped defending him. What was the last update I got? Luke was living with a friend, was broke, and was struggling to find a job. Melissa had blocked him on everything and moved on to another rich guy. He had gone from thinking he had it all to realizing he had nothing. And me? I was better than ever. It's been 6 months since I last saw him. Since then, my business has grown. I expanded my boutique, launched an online store, and tripled my revenue. I started dating again. Nothing serious, just fun, drama-free experiences that remind me what it's like to be appreciated. I'm genuinely happy. Not the fake, pretending everything's fine kind of happy, but the real, peaceful kind. Because Luke? He was never the best thing in my life. He was the thing holding me back. And now? I'm Finol, completely free. For good. Hope you enjoyed this story as much as I do. Help this small channel grow by hitting that like button, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. Every bit of support means the world. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.